Good afternoon, and a very, very happy Friday to you. How are you all doing on this glorious, glorious day? I'm just back from a run actually, and I've just realised this t-shirt has got real on. How very on brand I am today. Hope you're doing great. I hope that it is gloriously sunny wherever you are, and that you're able to either be out in your garden, or if you don't have a garden like me, that you're able to get out safely and spend a bit of time outside. Hi, good afternoon, Sasha. Hi, Spoon, how are you doing? And Paula, hi, how are you doing? Thank you so much for your message last night. Really nice to hear from you, and glad that you've got your mojo back. I'm interested to see what that means in practice. What does that actually mean? Let me know. So yeah, hope you're all enjoying the glorious, glorious sunshine. I've been running quite a lot on the treadmill to kind of keep myself safe and away from, the good old social distancing, but today was just such a beautiful day. I had to get outside, so absolutely gorgeous. And last week's, I can report that last week's baby ducklings are growing up fast. So we've seen them this morning. We were out for a very early morning walk, and we're also eagerly anticipating all the baby coots and swans. They're a nest. There's a swan's nest just around the corner from here. She's been sitting on it, well, they've been taking turns sitting on it for a little while. So baby swans, I will report back when they come, and the coots as well are going completely crazy. So yeah, it's absolutely beautiful here in East London. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are. Hi Lisa, hi. Definitely looking forward to catching up with you next week. I'll send you some times later on. So how has your week been? I hope you're doing great. I've had an actually really great week actually. Had some more sign-ups for my 6-step programme, and a workshop yesterday with the Royal Academy of Engineering that was super exciting, and yeah, it went really, really well. We had 14 small business owners, loads of really interesting companies. They were in biosciences and medical and engineering, and really, really technical stuff, some of it developing all kinds of really fascinating innovations. They are all part of a programme that the Royal Academy runs for high growth small businesses, small engineering businesses, I should say. And I was asked to run a series of workshops for them on people management. And then a few weeks ago, the lady contacted me and said, that workshop that you're going to run in April, can you do it online? And so, of course, there's actually only one answer when a client asks you that kind of question. So I've been spending the last few weeks converting my in-person workshop to an online workshop, and I ran that yesterday, which was brilliant. I so enjoyed it, and the early feedback has been really good as well. The topic actually of yesterday was the foundations of people management, so actually lots of links in terms of what I want to share with you today, some nice dovetails into today's live. So last week we spoke about building a team and finding the right people around you to make you successful. And actually today I want to talk a little bit about managing people. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's the bane of some entrepreneurs' lives. But actually, if you do it right, it can end up being one of the most amazing parts of being a business owner, actually. And it's particularly tricky at the moment when everybody's physically remote from each other. So I want to share with you my top 3 tips on management, but also some ideas and some tips for managing people remotely. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, or your experience. Okay, so the first thing that I'd say is that a lot of you might not actually think of yourself as managers. You might not think that you're actually managing people. And especially if it's just you, and for some of you that might be the case, and you might think that there isn't anything that's particularly relevant to you when I talk about teams or managing people. But I would actually strongly disagree, unless you're absolutely doing everything in your business, in which case, haven't you been listening to everything that I say every single week? Then you probably do have a team, and you probably are managing people. So let me explain what I mean. For example, what about your accountant? And what about the person that built your website? Or do you have someone doing design work for you? What about your social media? Most people, even if they are on their own in their business, have support, have people providing services to them. And I would argue that people management skills are just as relevant in terms of managing people who don't work for you full time. In fact, in some cases, actually more so, because those people that are providing you services are kind of juggling maybe lots of different clients, and so actually your ability to be a good manager is actually even more important. Some of aspects of people management will not apply if somebody is providing you a service, but I would argue, as I say, that actually there are more similarities than not. When I moved from being a permanent member of staff to being being a contractor, people would often ask me what the difference was, and from my perspective it didn't make any difference. I was still just as committed, I was still working just as hard. Now, I was working full-time as a contractor, and I think when you've got people working part-time, maybe it's a little bit different. But anyway, I still think a lot of what I'm going to share with you is still relevant. Yeah, so now we've established that people management, I think, is actually relevant to everybody in this group. I'm interested to know from you, what do you think makes a good manager? So what does anybody think makes a good manager? Who's got experience here of managing people? I'm looking down this lovely list. Anybody going to tell me what they think are the qualities of making a good manager? Well, in the meantime, whilst you ponder that, I am going to ask you also, do you know what the number one reason is that people leave their jobs? There's a lot of research that's been done on this, and time again, even though they'll tell you it's money or they'll tell you it's opportunity, study after study shows that actually people leave managers rather than jobs. And that's why this matters, and that is why people management is such a key and important aspect of every business owner's role. So Rosie, oh hi Rosie, you're back on Facebook, welcome. Rosie had a bit of a break from Facebook, nice to have a detox every now and then, so lovely to have you back. Rosie says empathy and good listening. I completely agree, and actually empathy is an interesting one because a lot of people think that empathy is something that you either have or don't have, but actually empathy is something that you can learn through practice, and listening definitely is, so I would definitely agree. I am going to come on now to sharing with you what I think my top 3 tips, let's say, in terms of people management, and see what if they resonate with you. So firstly, I want to share with you the number one thing that your people need from you and want from you as a leader. Paula is saying clarity of values and vision. Yes, absolutely. Nice segue into what I'm just about to share with you actually, which is the number one thing, again, that studies show that people want from managers and leaders. And this is super important. Yes, people want an interesting role, and yes, they want to get paid. Some people, depending on how they're wired, want variety, and others maybe want security. So different people want different things. Some people don't even have to like you, and they certainly don't have to agree with you, but what they all want, every single one of them, and what will actually set you apart from other business owners and leaders in your businesses is clarity. So exactly what Paula just said, not just clarity in terms of values and vision, but clarity in terms of your expectations of them. People want clarity. Now, people need to understand where they stand with you. Yeah, so the biggest source actually of kind of anger, confusion and frustration from people that have a job, that people that are working in the workplace, is actually lack expectations not being clear. So lack of clarity around what other people expect of them. And we find it actually not just in the workplace, but in other settings where when there's a lack of clarity, it's hugely frustrating. It can make people really angry, really emotional, and it's a really difficult situation to actually live with. Now, a lot of people ask me when I tell them that I think actually the number one thing that people want from you as a leader is clarity. People often ask me, well, how can I be clear? How can I give my people clear when I'm not clear? and everything's moving so fast and I feel so up and down. I mean, I don't need to tell any of you what an up and down road this wonderful world of entrepreneurship can be, this journey that we're all on. It certainly took me a while to get my head around this concept, because certainly in the beginning of my journey, I really struggled with lack of clarity. And when I saw this research and I was told that actually what people need is clarity, I was like, well, how am I supposed to give other people clarity when I'm not clear myself? But do you know what I've learned? And that is that you don't actually need to be clear yourself to give other people clarity. And now in my business, I prioritise giving my team as much clarity as I can, as much clarity about what I want from them, about what I expect from them. I might not always be clear about the end vision or the end goal. There are some days where still I struggle with that. And I know that many of you do, but that doesn't actually stop you giving your people clarity, being really clear about what you want them to do or what your expectations are. So that, I think, is actually a really important distinction. And for me, that was a real light bulb moment when I recognised that. So prioritise getting really clear about what you want your people to do, even if you feel like a muddle in your head. The first thing I often do of a morning is I prioritise giving people in my team tasks to do, because then whilst I'm working on what I need to work on, I know that people are getting on with things. So that was actually, as I say, a real moment for me when I understood that actually prioritising pushing stuff out to other people and being really clear about that makes you feel clearer. So you could start off feeling really muddled, and then you concentrate on and you focus on getting really clear about what you want other people to do, and then actually you find that brings yourself some clarity. Being really clear about how you want people to behave, what is the standard, what do you expect? And as I said, people won't always like it, but your job is not to be liked, your job is to be clear. But they will respect you because they know where they stand. So that's my first top tip about management and leadership. So secondly, I see a lot of people who are new to management making this mistake, and that is what I call the kind of superwoman or superman kind of complex. That mistake of thinking that they need to know everything and have all of the answers. Hi Terry, thanks for joining. Hope you are well. Good afternoon. When I first started working, I genuinely used to think that I needed to know everything, or at least that I needed to know more than all the people that were working for me. In order to be a good manager, I thought that I needed to know what they did and everything. I thought I needed to know everything about their job. I thought I really needed to know everything, or at least more, as I say, than those people who were working for me. I also used to believe that nobody would or could do things as well as me. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'm a lot of a perfectionist. And I genuinely thought that actually I could do better. I have to confess that to you all. I thought nobody would do it in my way or to my standards. And I started my career in a big corporate company, and I was climbing up the ladder and I was taking on more and more responsibility. And I genuinely thought that the only way was to work harder and harder and harder. And I ended up really putting my health and my family life at risk. And I know that I'm not the only one watching that has gone through a similar kind of cycle. And actually what changed for me was all the way back in 2002, I got an amazing opportunity for a role out in India, managing a large team. And the interesting thing about it was that it was an area of the business that I knew absolutely nothing about. So I found myself managing people who were doing things that I didn't understand. They were working in markets that I didn't understand. I had no clue really about the sort of details of what they were doing. And I was really, really worried, and I got really in my head and really, really anxious about the fact that I wouldn't be able to be a good manager. It was such a good opportunity for me, but I felt completely out of my comfort zone. I didn't understand their markets, their products, and I felt completely overwhelmed, you know, the new culture. I mean, everything was just so different for me. Imagine your first management job being in a completely different country, with a completely different products, and just everything was new for me. But actually, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it meant that what I learned in a really kind of strong way, because what I found was exactly the opposite of what I had believed. What I found was that my team weren't looking for knowledge from me. They weren't looking for me to know everything. What they were looking for from me was guidance and coaching and structure. So they needed me to have their back, and anybody who has had any experience of India knows that the working culture out there can be really, really challenging. And for them, having somebody come in and say, I've got your back, that was such a big thing for them. I would ask them what obstacles they faced, and then I would help them overcome them. So I didn't actually need to understand all the details, and that was just a complete revelation for me. They would come to me with a problem and I would ask them questions. So one of the key things you need to be able to do, as Paula said, is listen, ask great questions and listen. Your people will tell you. Your job is to help them find a way, not to have all the answers. So being a good manager is all about asking, not telling. I meet so many business owners who think that they need to have all the answers, and you really don't. You might feel overwhelmed with all the things that you need to do, role profiles, compensation matrix, objectives, all those things that I teach in my program. And my advice to you and to anyone that asks me this question is, get your people to do a draft for you. You don't have to write the job profile. Get them to write it, come to you, and then you have a discussion. So much better to get the other person to come up with their ideas, and then it's a much more collaborative process. A draft role profile, a draft objectives. If they come to you, if they say that they want to speak to you about resolving a problem, ask them to come prepared with their thoughts. What are their ideas? What are their solutions? What are the things that they're thinking about? The point is that they know more than you, and that is okay. Your job is not to know more than them. Your job is to help them find the right way, find the answers themselves, and that is when people management becomes really rewarding, when that flicks in your head from actually I don't need to be superwoman. In my case, my job is actually to help my team find their own way. That's my job. My job is to have their back and remove the obstacles and take all the blocks out of their way so that they can really thrive. So that's my second top tip around management. And then my third top tip for today is all about feedback. So there is a Russian folk tale, I don't know if you've heard it, and it's about a man who loved his dog so much that when the vet told him that the dog's tail had to be removed, the man simply couldn't do it. He couldn't do it all in once, and so he cut an inch of the dog's tail off every single day. So my advice to you is don't be that kind of manager. If you give unclear and infrequent feedback, it's a similar effect to that poor dog, minus all the blood, of course. You really end up hurting the person more than you would if you were just clear. And this is where I see a lot of managers and business owners and leaders making a mistake. They worry about hurting feelings, and so they hold back. Giving feedback is an art, and it is certainly something that you can learn. But if you hold back, the person doesn't have an opportunity to improve because they don't really know, because you haven't really been clear. And so then you end up firing them anyway. So that's not great. That's not being kind. This concept has been called cruel empathy. Giving unclear feedback because you want to save people's feelings, and you really want to avoid that. In order to give feedback that's actually going to help the person improve, which is the whole point after all, you have to get to a place where you stop caring about whether they like you or not. And that can be a really hard thing to do. You have to get over yourself. It's not about whether they like you or not. Giving feedback can be really emotional. Sometimes you get a really strong reaction coming back, people get angry, they get upset, and they can be really hard conversations. And so you have to be able to remove the need for you to be liked. And that is what I would say to any manager, actually, whether they're inexperienced or not, is it isn't about being liked. It isn't about people being your friend. And that can be really difficult to get to, especially, you know, in businesses. Maybe you start out in business with people that you know or you like, you know, maybe your friends or even family members. So, but business is business, and managing people, you want to help them, you want to help them develop. As I say, if they don't improve, you're just going to fire them anyway, right? If they're not up to your expectations. So giving feedback is hugely important. And as I say, you can only really do that effectively if you remove your own need, get out of the way of your own ego and remove your need to be liked. If the person has an emotional response to the feedback you're giving them, your job obviously is to react empathetically. Yeah. So you need to stop caring about whether they like you, but you absolutely don't want to stop caring about them. You need to be empathetic, but not sugarcoat the feedback that you're giving them. And also, don't try and prevent or control other people's feelings. They're an adult. Allow them to have the response that they need to have. And if it's emotional, let that be. Let that be. Don't take that on. Let that be empathetic and be kind, but don't sugarcoat what you are trying to say to them. Don't worry about the right way to say something. If you're coming from the right place, it's just about being straightforward. Yeah, it's about being straightforward and also being timely. So don't wait. Don't wait until the next formal review or until you can kind of face it. You've got to do it as quickly as possible because otherwise they might not remember. You might give them an example from 3 months ago and they might be like, what are you talking about? And obviously do it in a private setting so that if there is an emotional response, that is okay. And there is space and time for them to absorb what you're telling them. It's funny because when I talk about feedback, people usually assume that it means something negative. But actually, feedback is obviously about positive reinforcement as well. And what I would just say is a small word of warning about that. Don't bullshit people. Especially if you're going to say something nice. People like me, if you give me nice feedback, I will ask you for an example. So, you need to be specific, otherwise people will know that you're bullshitting. So platitudes and generic nice things generally don't work. Be specific if you want to give people positive feedback. In fact, being specific, is important whether you're giving negative or positive, but particularly kind of high achievers or people that are perfectionists or people that are hard on themselves will ask you for examples if you happen to say something nice. So be specific, otherwise people will see right through you. So I remember actually when I got that exciting job in India that I was telling you about, my very first proper management role, and I was so excited and I was so thrilled, and I wrote to a senior manager in the firm who had been really supportive of me and mentored me kind of along the way, and I sent him the organisational announcement that said Lisa Roberts, as I was back then, Lisa Roberts has been appointed as the channel sales and marketing manager in Xerox India, and I was so extraordinarily excited. And I sent him that organisation announcement to kind of go, yay, look at this, how exciting. And he emailed me straight back and he said, well done. And then he said, remember, you are not there to be anyone's friend. You're there to get the job done. Have you ever had a response like that feels like somebody sort of pricking your balloon or chucking a whole load of iced water like that? What do they call it? The ice bucket challenge. It really felt exactly like that. But do you know what? It was actually one of the best bits of advice that I've ever had. I reminded myself of that the first time that I had to fire somebody, which is a really hard thing to have to do. I've done it a number of times now in my career, and it's never an easy thing to do. But that advice has stayed with me, and it's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. And I also remind myself of it every time I need to give someone some feedback that I think that they are probably going to find difficult. So I repeat, your job is not to have people like you, it is to give them clarity. So they are my top 3 tips on people management. Give your people clarity. You are not Superman or Superwoman, and avoid cruel empathy when giving feedback. Okay, so now on to some specifics then for today's crazy times, or unprecedented, I think is the word that the media keep using. So how to manage people when most people are working remotely, most people are working from home. So actually most of these tips that I'm going to share with you are relevant regardless of who or how you're managing, but they are particularly important right now in my view. So number 1, I would say recognise how much of a challenge this whole working remotely, working from home might be for you depending on your management style. So I know a lot of people who do not believe in working from home. They do not allow their people to work from home, and they just don't believe in it. They don't think it works, and they just don't allow it. I've met many managers like that over the years, and I know a lot of people like that, and maybe you do too. And so those people, and maybe some of you are watching, those people are having to shift their view of what works and what doesn't work, and they're having to make it work. So I'm not making a judgment about that. You know, everybody has their own management style. I've actually always been quite a fan of allowing people to flexibly work, because it's all about objectives, right? Not about the hours, or, you know, I don't need you under my nose. Once I learned how to manage people and stop being quite such a control freak. But recognise that this might actually be really hard for you, managing people remotely. It might not be something you've ever done before, might not be something that you agree with or particularly feel comfortable with. You might be quite a hands-on manager. And so that's the first thing I would say, is just check in with yourself first and say, actually, I'm finding this quite hard, or actually this quite suits me. So just recognise where you are, because everything always starts with you. It's about your reaction, it's about your behaviour, it's about whether you're reacting or responding. Yeah? So then the second thing I would say is that remember then, each person that we're talking about here that you're managing is also an individual, and they will also be dealing with it in different ways. So some people, and I've spoken about this before, some people are loving it, are loving working at home, and other people are really struggling with it. Some people are juggling childcare, homeschooling, all kinds of different things. Some people have never worked from home, some people are very experienced from working from home. I've got a bit of a theory, and this is maybe a huge generalisation, but I'm interested to observe, I suppose, the difference between how some extroverts, or people who get their energy from being around people, how more extroverted people are handling this situation versus the more introverted people. And this is a huge generalisation, because everybody is sort of somewhere on that spectrum. But from the people that I've spoken to and been in contact with, the introverts seem to be finding ways to manage it, whereas the extroverts seem to be really, some of the people that I've spoken to, really kind of struggling because they're not getting that connection with people. Even though we're doing things like that, we're having Zoom calls, we're talking to each other, it's still really hard if you actually get your energy from being around people, not to have that at the moment. So that is what I would say. Some people are feeling lonely, some people are feeling really isolated, and actually be aware that members of your team might be feeling left out. Yeah, they might be, if they're used to kind of being in the mix and being in the conversation, it can be really kind of lonely, and sort of that feeling of isolation when you're working from home. So just be aware of how the different people might be feeling is what I would say. The third thing, and this is absolutely critical in terms of management, regardless of whether you're managing remote or not, but probably again particularly so, and that is setting clear boundaries and expectations. Be really super clear about what you want. That is I mentioned it as my number one tip, right? I mean, it really, really is important. And particularly when you're remote like this, where you can't necessarily check in with people so easily, setting those boundaries and expectations around timelines, around responsiveness, about the quality of work, just about what you want to get done, about when they can check back in with you, about how they should contact you, all of those things that I've spoken about on previous lives when I've talked about delegation and managing tasks. It's super important that you are really, really clear. If delegation doesn't work, you've got to look at yourself. Maybe it wasn't the right person. Maybe they didn't do a good job. But 9 times out of 10, in my experience, when it doesn't work, it's because you haven't been clear. Yeah, or I haven't been clear if it's me. Yeah, so the person, the delegator, if you like, has a responsibility for being super clear. And if you'd like a refresh on that live, then search back in the live. I'm sure that I did that sometime last year, all about delegation, or if you'd like me to do you a refresh, I'm very happy to go through that again. But there's a clear process to go through with delegation that will make it work. So one of the things that I really learned when I had that experience in India, my first real experience of managing people, is because I didn't understand all the nitty-gritties of what they were doing, I was able to focus on outcomes. And that is a huge deal as a manager when you learn that actually managing is not about telling people what to do. It's about managing the outcomes. It's about being really clear. This is the goal I want you to get to. This is the outcome I want, and not getting too involved in how they get there. Because let's remember, we're all wired differently, and so different people will do different things to get to the same outcome. And you should not care about how they get there, because otherwise you're just micromanaging them. For junior people, it's okay, or more junior people, it's okay to give them more guidance in terms of how you want them to get there. But the more experienced and the more senior the person, the more they will just not like it, not have it. It just won't work if you are telling people how to get to the outcome. Your job is to be really clear about where you want them to get to. And the more you can leave people free about how they get there, the more empowered they will feel, and the more time you will free up of yourself. So I would always encourage you to manage by outcomes so tell people what rather than how. If they want to ask about how and ask you how you would do it, that's fine, but don't push your method, your way of doing things on them. Okay, particularly important in these times is about frequent conversations. I mean, I'm a big fan of having frequent one-to-ones anyway. I advise on this workshop that I ran yesterday, I was saying to all of the business owners on the call yesterday that they should be having weekly one-to-ones with all of their people. And some of them looked quite horrified. And the reason they look quite horrified is because some of them are still trying to directly manage 10, 11 people. And I very clearly said to them, in order to be a good manager, 5 to 7 absolute max. Nobody can manage, in my opinion, nobody can manage more than 5 to 7 people well, in my experience, both my own experience, but also working with many, many business owners who are managing people. To do a good job, 5 to 7 max. So a regular one-to-one. Now this is really important in these times where we're not physically seeing each other, because one of the reasons why people don't do regular one-to-ones is they say, oh, well, I'm in the office every day with them, we talk all the time. By the way, that's not the same as a one-to-one, but frequent conversations, frequent checking in is really, really important. And don't forget that a lot of your non-verbal cues can only be picked up if you're on video. So I would definitely say wherever possible when you're checking in with people, when you're having your one-to-ones, put that video camera on. It's much more difficult to pick up how people are when you're just on the phone, and certainly checking in via email, etc. I'm not saying that that's not okay to do that, but make sure you're speaking to people regularly on video. So I would say in terms of one-to-ones, actually I would diarise longer when you're remote from people, allow more time for kind of chit chat, the more of the, you know, how are you doing? I mean, you should be doing a lot of that in your one-to-ones anyway, but probably you need more time when we're remote from each other, and you'll definitely need more time with those more extroverted people, because as I say, they need that connection, and it's not as good on video as face-to-face, despite what the research says, or certainly not in my experience. I mean, I miss hugging people. Any of you people, next time I see you, I am going to give you a hug. I'm warning you already now. That's what I'm missing. I've only got my husband to hug, and he's lovely to hug, but I am missing hugging people. So make sure you're giving your people those virtual hugs via the video camera as well. Okay, so there are a few tips in terms of managing remotely. A few more. Collaboration, I think, is also very important. Not all the communication has to come through you. So if you've got a small team, encourage your people to collaborate with each other. Make sure that that is happening. It absolutely reduces loneliness and it empowers the team. So encourage a couple of people to work on a particular project. Ask people, encourage collaboration, maybe almost more than you might do in the normal run of things. Now, in order to manage effectively from home, you need to be organised. And I know that can really be a challenge, particularly for those of you that are juggling, homeschooling, childcare, etc. It's really important to be organised about your management. I mean, I mentioned one-to-ones, you need to get those diarised, but being really clear about what the priorities are each week and each day requires you to be organised and to have a bit of a plan. And on that subject, we will be digging into that and giving you lots of kind of hints and tips and discussing that in more depth at next week's community event, which is going to be held online. So last month we held the first one online, and it was absolutely great. We had quite a good group of people on the Zoom call. We all had our video cameras on, and we were sharing lots of kind of best practices and things that we were all doing. And yeah, it was a really good session. So I hope you can join us next Wednesday, 10 till 12, where we will be talking about time and how you're managing your time and getting organised and how to manage all of these different things. My last point around managing remotely is tools, and I've left this one till last because people always, or not always, a lot of people get very excited about the technology. The technology is always an enabler, so you have to get those first things that I've talked about right before technology is really going to be able to help you. So clearly file sharing like Dropbox or Drive, Zoom or Skype calls, as I mentioned, to talk to each other. As I mentioned, my very top tip is to use video always, whenever possible. Slack is a great communication tool. If you don't already have that in your business, definitely have a look at that. That is a free tool. You can also have a paid version, but it's a lot of the functionality is available with the free version, and that is kind of it's basically a chat piece of software, but it allows you to have different channels for different topics, and you can have different groups of people in different channels. So that is a great piece of software. If you haven't already seen that, or you don't know about Slack, definitely have a look at that. And also Trello, or similar, to organise your tasks. So I used to use Asana, and I've quite recently moved over to Trello, and I really like it. There's also Basecamp, and there are others I'm sure that you use or that you can find. But something to organise teams, organise yourself, but also help collaboration and help other people get organised. So there are various different pieces of technology, but I would definitely say don't start there. Start with the people. It's always, for me, it's always people first, and then technology is enabling. So, hi Tommy, how are you doing? Been on TV again recently? Tommy's a bit of a superstar, and I think he was on Sky and BBC with his Captain Fantastic children's parties. So your business went from booming to almost nothing, I imagine, overnight, but doing lots of online children's parties and all kinds of amazing stuff. So a bit of a superstar on television. So welcome, hope you're doing well. I'm interested to know then what aspects of managing people do you find difficult, and also particularly what areas would be useful for me to talk about in future lives. I've mentioned kind of delegation, I've mentioned feedback, I've got a lot more on both of those topics. Also different top tips in terms of how to manage. I mentioned objectives, so we could do something around setting objectives, etc. So let me know what would be useful, because people management is a huge long topic. As I mentioned, I did 3 hours with the Royal, or 3.5 hours yesterday with the Royal Academy of Engineering and their SME Leaders Programme, and I will be doing, so that was the foundations of people management. Next month I will be running how to build a great management team and talk about managing managers as your business scales. And then the third workshop, which will be in June, is all around how to attract and retain great people and how to do formal appraisals and how to communicate, and a lot more on that sort of vision and values piece that Paula had mentioned earlier on. So if any of those topics would be useful for me to cover in future lives, please do let me know. If you are coming to next week's event, Wednesday the 29th of April, I'll post the link again in the community just to remind you, but you do need to register. It's an online Zoom meeting, but you will need to register for that meeting, so please go ahead and do that. And whatever you're doing this weekend and whoever you're with, I wish you a very happy and peaceful time. I would like to ask you to take care, stay safe and keep in touch. As I always say, if you need to talk, if you want to talk, then you know where I am. Please reach out. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye. Speak to you soon.